to write it.
Yeah, that's what the programming language.
Yeah, I know the guy who
Programs
did
do all of that for you, so you don't have to think about specifically only errors.
So you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
It seems like it seems like as programming language keep evolving,
How much
it's
report rate?
becoming even
I
more
love
like
it.
that, where more stuff is
Although,
happening.
almost all my.
We do mostly
You can't
internal.
customize it, but you have to,
So
they
we
force
have
you to
external
customize
facing
it.
report.
Out of the box.
Also, like you guys
About
have
the time
stuff
I
like.
got it
Yeah.
full, it was like taking the hose off of it to redirect it into the toilet.
We all talk about stuff I haven't even thought about since I was in college.
You know, this stuff. Oops.
That was a long time ago.
Oh my gosh, I hated, that was my systems class.
For whatever reason, it was no use sticking out.
I mean,
I gotta see
that
these
stuff
fluxes.
that stuff is really interesting to me though. I mean, I would
know,
want to
I
work,
put
but I don't
on
know if I
it.
want to work with
It wasn't
it.
like I was in there doing like some sort of.
I mean, it's cool to know about it though, you know.
Yeah, but once you get a taste of optical,
But you could hear
you
me.
can't go back to like this.
All that we could find Lowe's.
You can hear me pretending not to
It's just
hear
you
me
don't
right
want
now.
to, once you have a taste of something that's like that, it's hard going back into having to.
That's
I think we should
like world.
dealing with embedded systems.
Yes.
Well, Python never made me.
Memory and
I started with Python.
Yes.
This is Tron Lady God?
Yes,
It's like a memory address Python.
Yes.
but the program is completely different.
Python
I don't
never
know
made me like touch
combine
a memory
channels.
address by name.
Oh yeah, and never.
Oh, is it like
You just
the
define
Tron
it.
version is different than the paid
No,
version?
Completely
And the
different.
interpreter under the
What
hood
the
is
hell?
automatically handling
Or
it.
I paid for the wrong version. I don't
It'll find it
know.
into your
That's
computer
a
register, it'll start syncing everything to it.
No idea. It looks
And it'll keep
completely different.
up with
We're just gonna have to go
all
with
the
one mic.
applications in
Until I
there.
get a leak somewhere.
And then when you close that application,
Just fine,
down,
'cause
those
there's only
garbage collector
a
that's
handful of
behind it,
computers. I don't know
frees up
which
all
one
the
it is.
memory that's actually sitting there.
Okay, I'm trying to turn this.
Can you hear me okay right now?
That's
Yeah.
why back in the day, they had a lot of
Can you hear me?
problems like memory
Yeah.
leaks.
Well, we'll just replace it.
Like old applications that had like memory leaks.
Alright, so we also, no, we're not
application would
streaming.
just-
For example, like the life count or the health count or things like that. Throughout the whole game, it would be on the same memory address that kept track of all of that. So I know this because I messed with
Alright,
them.
we are.
And you know, oftentimes.
Yours?
There's only one now, yeah.
Yeah.
These
Yeah,
guys
it's
are
all
J-Lo.
assembly and C, C.
Yeah.
Here, let's in front of the audience.
See, that just sucks.
If you go back as far as the Game Boy Color and even the Game Boy, you can actually, there's scripts that allow you to take those games and turn them into assembly code.
You're in audio.
So, you know, that's probably a lot of what they were working with too.
Am I getting
Back then.
remote people's audio?
That makes sense.
Mackenzie, talk to us.
Hey, what's
I
up?
mess with like emulation
That
and
will be
stuff.
less
so.
distracting as I do not work things.
I've never
If
gotten too
you
big into that
got-
stuff.
wanted to fill in cybersecurity career,
It's interesting to
then you
learn
should
how
work
the
at
game works
Dragos.
without seeing any of the code, you know what I mean?
Everyone should work at Dragos.
Go on.
It's like,
Well, I applied there and I was told to go away.
Is your hair orange or red?
My hair?
Orange or red?
It's like a burnt orange, scarlet. Like the reason it shows up super orange is
yeah,
I'm
it's
sitting
interesting
directly
to me,
under a
you know,
cat like
normal projects
straight
are
down
you
these
just
pixel
go in
plates.
and figure out what it's doing because
Your
it's how
beard
you know
also
what I mean? But
My beard is just
Like,
regularly
in the
orange.
game,
That's
it's like,
like,
well, it's all
turn the
compiled,
volume
so you,
down.
and they have the
But
code, so you
It's more red than it looks like on camera.
So
Okay.
you have to kind of play games to guess
Alright.
how exactly it works
We can play with audio.
with RAM and such like that.
Okay.
You ready to
We-
roll?
We've got an entire first part to go through.
15 minutes in.
We're so early, we're late.
Alright.
Wait, hold on. I gotta grab a beer now.
Now he's got 27 minutes from now.
I'm
The only
never
thing
ever going to
I
live that down.
dabbled in it, 'cause I dabbled a little bit.
I mean, you did have perfect timing.
But it was,
Do I just get to sit?
it was just so much work and effort. I kinda
I
gave
wasn't
up.
doing development,
Yeah, I'll take not doing anything.
technically. I mean, yeah.
What's up?
You can also take the
I
ROM,
don't need it, I just
Which-
figured if I needed a pair of speakers,
which is
then
where
I
the
have
actual
something on.
game's data is held, you can convert it
This
from
chair is
like.
exactly what I want to sit in all day. This is
something
wonderful.
Like,
This is one of those 4-hour long video chairs.
decimal or something like that, that's impossible to read. So you can convert that. I can't remember how exactly
There it
you
is.
do it, but most of it
Nope,
just looks
still
like
terrible.
gibberish.
Okay,
If you search
that's
the
fine.
file, you can find like,
I think
oh,
so,
here's the
yeah.
text in the game, and it's like it's just sitting there, you know. So I just
We ready?
changed the text
Yeah, yeah,
around.
yeah.
It's like, oh,
Hold
it
on.
says the
Yeah,
F
hold
word
on.
over and
Yeah,
over.
yeah.
Are you gonna MC for us then?
It kind of reminds you
Sorry.
even
Yeah,
more
that-
so that the game
Yeah,
is
that's better.
it kind of makes the game feel less real the more you do that. Yeah.
Am I getting both?
Doing both what? Now what are you doing? It was all working. What have you tried to?
No, I'm not touching anything. Tim's just silent.
Am I emceeing now? That's what I asked.
Yes.
Okay.
We just got scared because you were quiet. We thought you were dead.
No, it's just
It's
working.
been a bit.
How was everyone's night?
I'm doing all right.
Can I get everybody to stand up real quick?
No.
No.
And spin in a circle.
Tim is a troll.
I am a troll. There's all the beautiful people.
We have people! Yay!
Woo!
I can't.
Trying to get this into, trying to get this into.
And we have these people.
I have a pickle.
And
You have a pickle?
And we have a person with a pickle.
We don't need personal details.
Will it work if I do this?
What's, oh, he's presenting over.
Alright, happy April Fool's Fools. Alright, April.
Tim, I thought of you fondly when I ordered this.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Such a tease.
We can send them to you.
Yeah, please don't.
It might be a little rotted by the time.
Wait, can we talk to the
Right.
incubator and get permission to fix the TV for next time? Because it's about to drive me nuts. Like it's, don't touch it. It's seriously, it's holding on to that fake shiplap that's back there.
Yeah.
Is it about to fall off the wall?
Brother, it's like,
It hasn't yet, it's fine.
there's half of a 1-inch lag bolt holding that thing in there.
Well, I'm more concerned over the fact that it's like.
It's a good thing we're recording then so we can get everybody's reaction when it falls. Alright, you guys can see my screen?
Yes.
Alright, so, this is our presentation crew. Welcome to Cul-de-sac. I'm gonna do the opposite. I'm gonna start at the bottom right corner with Mr. Corey Grant, who's concerned about a TV falling off the wall.
I mitigate risk is what I do.
Yeah,
Identify and mitigate.
and you do a fine job of it too. Thank you for your service. We've got running the computers, Mr. Garrow, David Garrow, who's next to a tank in his picture. We've got Jeff, Mr. Lang, who is virtual like I am. Howdy. Myself, Timothy D-Block, who will be emceeing and presenting.
What's wrong with your name?
What?
What's wrong with your name? Your name banner is incorrect.
What do you mean?
No, Tim gets a special one because he wanted it.
Okay.
I mean,
He worked very hard on that logo.
I didn't put that. I don't know that I put that up there. It's been there so long. So, what's wrong with my name?
It's
Nothing, it's
one
a-
of these
it's a wonderful
things
name.
isn't like the other.
You should change the font on Jessica's name. Just put.
Oh my God! Don't.
Jessica's here for this meetup in case you couldn't tell.
You missed me last month.
Less direct than it was
God,
before.
can you make me lose 5 pounds, please? Edit that.
What is happening, Tim?
We're
Oh,
live editing.
I was told to make it bigger.
This is what
Doing it live. Miss Jessica Butel. Butel.
You get 3
Bottle?
times louder.
You're fired.
We are a professional organization.
Soon to be a doctor. How much more you got?
Dr. Fraulein.
1 year and like 2 weeks. Not that I'm counting.
And I didn't mean to skip Adam. I was just.
No, I'm glad. Skip the
I was
purchaser of the pickles.
Really, my
Mr.
intention
Adam
was
Twitty.
to get him focused on his name, and then I was gonna be like, oh, and that's Adam.
That is Adam.
But,
I need someone to point at these people. There you go. I like that.
The disembodied hand of David Girl.
Get connected. We have a Slack channel where we've shared beer and memes. I shared a great card management tip, which was hone your inner internal bullshit detector, which is a great tip, by the way. We do have an email list if you're still into email or not. Twitter @call_sac. I don't know if we're really doing anything with the Twitter right now. I think we're tweeting out about stuff happening.
It's basically just an announcement board at this point.
It's what?
It's an announcement board at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe my new boss will direct me to do something about that.
It could be a personal project, homie.
Put it on the list.
We have cul-de-sac.org. Email is info@cul-de-sac.org. We're on LinkedIn, YouTube, all the funds. So go to your mobile devices and go ahead and share what you're drinking on there. If it's your own or if one of the other guys brought beer. What do you guys have for beer right now?
Oh man, we have a fine selection. David brought a mixed 6-pack. John brought a set of hazy IPAs. I've got some eclectic chaos that includes some chaos from Southern Grist, which I'm going to
Very
enjoy
nice.
So did you bring in this 0.5% alcohol?
I only bought the one of those,
Oh,
and I will
thank
never
God.
do that again.
Stinks.
I bought a beer that was a 0.5% alcohol, and it was awful. It was just.
Oh,
I
is this,
didn't realize it
was
was
it one of the
0.5%
non-alcoholic ones?
until I got it home, and then I was like, oh, well, maybe it won't be that bad. Oh, it was. I would never pour beer out. Got 2 sips in, and no, not doing this.
Was this one of those non-alcoholic ones?
Yeah, it's low alcoholic, but yeah, that was the whole point of it, was to be low alcohol content. And
Yeah, but they're supposed to
How
still
do
be
you
delicious.
drink beer,
I don't have answers for you, man. I just have frustration.
This is what's great about being in person again, is that you guys can bring in beer and share it.
I'm not just day drinking at my house anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Mental health is a thing. We have had a presentation previously with Amanda to talk about mental health. It's a recorded session, so it was a great presentation. So you're gonna have to hold on a second.
If you're unfamiliar with this Mental Health Hackers organization, that was a really good presentation, and Amanda's good people. She's easily accessible on the Twitters. You get a hold of her. And I think there's also a few other folks involved in the Mental Health Hackers that are equally easily accessible on Twitter and pretty active in the InfoSec community on there. So, but definitely go to therapy. It's very important.
Speaking of mental health, I have a 13-year-old now, so.
Hooray!
Tuesday!
All right.
This dropped right at both of these. Really just dropped right after our presentation last one. So if you haven't heard of Lapsus, Lapsus is so when I do threat modeling, one of the things I do to start a conversation with people outside of security, when we're talking about attacking a data flow diagram, is I go, okay, so here's a scenario. What if I bribe you with $1 million? And they're like, wait, you can't. Oh. So I've always talked about bribery and extortion as a threat modeling discussion point, just to get things started. That seems to be happening more and more, and Lapsus really kind of highlighted this, where they were just doing pretty much data theft and extortion. Their way in was either bribing employees or trying to social engineer the service desk to resetting accounts and letting them in. So it's a fun bit of it's an interesting group. Some big name companies got hit: Samsung, Nvidia, Ubisoft, Vodafone. If you heard anything about Okta in the last month, that was a big thing.
Oh yeah.
Microsoft, and they were apparently tied to Electronic Arts previously. This is kind of what I pegged at it as it was early coming out. It was like teenagers. It seemed very they seemed very immature and not professional. And it's funny that I'm calling criminals professional, but the ransomware and the online criminals have really gone professional, as we'll find out in some of this presentation. These guys were very much opposite of that. They had a public Telegram channel where they were sharing information. They had 45,000 subscribers. 7 of them between the ages of 16 to 21 were arrested in London, and they started going through court proceedings there. So very young group of hackers doing things. There's a lot of interesting things to dive into. It could probably be a presentation in itself, but a couple call-outs I wanted to make was, it was funny with NVIDIA's thing, because to get in, they had to register their own device to download the data and extort it. NVIDIA found it, and because the device was registered with NVIDIA, they pretty much just put a ban hammer on their device. So they kind of got owned by NVIDIA's actual, controls that were in place for device management. Microsoft also stopped them, apparently because they were monitoring the Telegram channel, so that they were doing some stuff. So,
hey, I think I know that data center.
Yeah, exactly. And then the biggest one was probably Okta, because Okta did not have a good response. Apparently there was a third-party vendor breach that hit maybe just like 100 to 200 clients. And they had what they do with this stuff too is they take screenshots of consoles and other stuff to try and publicly put it out there to say that they've gotten in. But what happened was they got into some support technician's person who could not reset Okta's any Okta user accounts. Right, so it was sort of limited, but it was still a lot of information that was on there. And Okta's response to it was not great. I think they've since cleaned it up, but that's been a big highlight within the community. I don't know if anybody else has anything else to add to this. It's been an interesting thing that's played out over the month, and I feel like now it's kind of winding down.
I feel like Okta's response was inexcusably bad to this. This is not the first time a security company has gotten popped and gone, no, there was no problem, nothing happened. And then gone, well, about that.
Well, it was. I mean, it was. I kind of see their point with the fact that it wasn't as big of a thing as people. Because people when they jump to Okta was breached, they go, "Oh crap!" And Okta's like, "Whoa."
I get you.
Right, I'm with you. They still didn't handle it, but it was still like
the security community is the worst in the world about going, "Oh God, the sky's falling!" Like, it's what we do. So yeah, we would have overreacted, but
I want someone to get ready to hug Adam because I'm gonna absolutely segue into the next topic, which was absolutely that what Adam just said. The sky is falling.
Well, I'm going
I was expecting you to just slam the rest of that beer.
It's actually good. I want to enjoy it.
Yeah, sure. So Spring for Shell was a resume generating event for some people. People were claiming it was going to be close to Log4Shell. It wasn't anywhere near there. It's in the Spring Java framework. I've kind of left the notes kind of a little bit lower here. Default was not affected. So what you had to do was have the Spring framework, a Spring framework developed app. Hold on. Yeah, this is the troubles of working.
Was that the 13-year-old?
No, this is more friends coming over to see if they can play because the sun's out, right? Winter months you don't have that. All right, try.
This. You're muted, Tim.
Also, online problems.
So
it was it's a Spring developed app on top of an Apache Tomcat, and then the file type has to be a war file type. So there's some very nuanced things that have to happen for you to actually be vulnerable to this.
It was really kind of a trick shot vulnerability, right? Like in order to exploit it, you've got to hit everything just right, and it had to be configured just right. And then
it's kind of like the Log4, because you remember Log4Shell had like 4 different vulnerabilities that came after the fact.
Yeah.
The first 2, it's like, all right, serious, and then the other one's like, wait, the CVE is that I go disable my security settings on this? Like, how is that a CVE?
Yeah. Because again, sky's falling, we panic.
Yeah.
Everybody
Adam had to deal with a lot with that. I don't know if anybody else had to really deal with this. I kind of looked at it and went, meh. We don't use Spring for Shell in any of our, or we don't use the Spring framework in any of our stuff. So all right, those were kind of the big news items. Kept the news kind of short because we're going to dive into a lot of news with Ukraine and Russia. I spent a lot of time just going through articles, so it's got a little news out at that point. Was there any other news people want to bring up that's happened over the last month?
Over the last month, I graduated from a coding program. I know no one knows me here yet, but that's if you want to talk about news within the past month, there's that, you know.
Congratulations. Which coding program was it?
I went to Carolina Code School. It's a boot camp in the upstate.
Yeah, they've been running for a decade now. It's been a long time.
Yeah, they in some sense started out as the Iron Yard. I think the Iron Yard was actually a different company, but they have some overlap.
Yeah, I've heard of Iron Yard.
Yeah.
Is that a pretty good ticket to a development job? That
I'd say so. Yeah. I mean, they teach you a lot of good stuff. You know, our stack was React and Django, and it is a web development course too.
Yeah. No, we have something similar here with the Nashville Code School or whatever. It's a lots of similar name there. And I know a lot of developers that get hired out of that who go through that course. It's like a 6-month course where you go build an actual product or an app.
Given the way Iron Yard used to operate, it would not surprise me terribly if that was actually the same folks behind both schools, but I don't know that.
I mean,
No, it doesn't.
The same
Yeah,
people
the-
who were involved in the Iron Yard.
There were some ideas that got Iron Yard started that then fractured off into the code school, and they spun off some of their other, because it was kind of a code school plus incubator plus, and they sort of split all of those ideas into separate components and let them run independently because it didn't all work together.
I think really it's, and I could be somewhat wrong about this, but I think what happened was it was the Iron Yard. There was the Iron Yard before in the same area, and it was kind of the same people running that. And since the Iron Yard went away in the area, I think because of some kind of financial reason or something, the same people decided to start Carolina Code School. So, you know, I think that's the story.
They made their $1 million and they ran off.
And I don't know.
Alright, cool. If there's no other news,
Yeah, let's dive in.
we're going to skip the cool wall due to our technical difficulties, unless someone really wants to go through the cool wall, but I figure we could probably save some time with that.
Yep.
Alright, I'm going to introduce myself. Presenter introduction, name of presenter, optional, title, name of employer, time of presentation, synopsis.
Jim, did you
So
just
we're-
glitch?
No, it's the speaker notes. That's the speaker notes now. It's like the Ron Burgundy thing.
Yeah.
So we are going to talk about Russia versus Ukraine. There's, like I said, there's a lot of stuff to cover there. It's really interesting and a lot of different dynamics. I don't think there's a lot that really impacts people unless it's Ukraine or Russia. But this has been an interesting war because social media is around. So we're getting a lot of different things going on with it. We're kind of seeing warfare change almost right before our eyes. So we will run through that topic. So these are our sponsors. You guys are back in the incubator. Glad to see so many people in person. It's freaking awesome. Checkpoint and Atlantic Data Security. Love those guys. Go grab a beverage. I guess we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Is that our shooting for? We're still doing that thing. We still have to set up stuff, right?
I mean, do you need to set anything up? I think everything is set up.
I need to set up some more beer.
Well, then we're gonna take a brief intermission while you grab a beer, and then we're ready to rock and roll.
Alright.
Oh.
Okay.
Everyone's had a seizure.
Epilepsy.
Welcome to Cul-de-sac.
What just happened? Alright, we'll go intermission for a second.
Oh, let's.
You are live.
Am I live now? Am I live now? Can you hear me?
Nope.
Can you hear me now?
Nope.
I don't trust you.
Can you hear me now?
We can't hear you.
I don't trust me either.
Can you hear me now? Alright, so let's talk about Russia versus Ukraine. This is kind of
Trial.
What? Trial?
Trial.
Thank you. Could you guys hear the trial?
No.
At all, David? Oh my gosh, it was awful. That's why you guys got all the text messages. So just so that Jeff and I could remind you that we were still here listening.
Yeah, the best part was we had no idea what was happening.
Yeah. These are my work slides because I'm doing a presentation tomorrow on the same topic. We've actually already done one, but I'm going to go ahead and recap and we'll talk about what's new. This has been going on since the end of February. And it's actually a really interesting pretty much war, like I said, because the conflict's going on, and this is the first war we've actually had social media around. I don't know if people realize that, but any previous war really didn't have a lot of hardcore social media. We've seen like some pretty significant impacts to things like, oh, I don't know, the election and other things where social media played an interesting role. But just to recap briefly what actually happened for anybody that isn't aware, Russia invaded the Ukraine. You know, and I haven't really paid attention to a whole lot of the actual conflict. I've been paying attention more to the technology side of stuff. That's what a lot of this is research into the technology side of stuff. As per social media, there's a lot of misinformation out there, right? So there's a lot of Russians are trying to spread some disinformation, and you know, people just, you can kind of craft things on Twitter and social media. This kind of goes somewhat back to our mental health hacker stuff, right? You can craft your life to be this perfect thing when it's really just a mess. And so that could be done with the war as well. So this has really turned into a bit of an information war. So pre-conflict action, so prior to, we had a lot of stuff dating even back to like 2015, 14, where Ukraine was pretty much had a lot of their critical infrastructure hacked. What's interesting and coming out more recently is that they kind of learned from that, which is what prepared them for a lot of what's going on right now. But
That was
Russia,
power grid and stuff like that.
Dark energy.
yeah, the power grid. And yeah, please make this interactive. I'd like to make this as interactive because I probably missed some stuff. There's a lot of different, and even today I was looking, I was like, oh crap, I missed this, or you know, there's newer stuff coming out. So feel free to interrupt me. I'm not going to get upset. But they also did things like DDoS banking sites. They spam texted that the ATMs are being disrupted. And what's the thing that's going to get people really hyped up is disruption to their money. Okay, money is a huge thing. If you want to fish someone, you talk about the money. If you want to get your company in the news, you send a fish out about bonuses or payroll or something like that people are getting a bonus bump. It pisses people off. But that's what they were trying to do. Russia was trying to do is cause some sort of confusion about a lot of the ATMs and other stuff within Ukraine. What's been interesting too about this is U.S. intelligence has provided a lot of information on Russian hacking. You know, they talked about Ukraine military, energy, and other critical networks, disruptions, and try to help Ukraine strengthen a lot of their operations. And if you've worked in the U.S. government or dealt with anything with them, you know it takes a really long time to get anything done. With this, they have really expedited a lot of their intel. So the U.S. has done a lot of notifications, talked about critical infrastructure. They did tabletop exercises, but they've also started like disrupting things like bot farms from social media, and warned about certain defense contractors being breached. So there's a lot of different things that have been going on. And a couple of other things that the Russians have done is they have Ukraine-specific malware. So we've really seen a lot of that. If anybody remembers NotPetya, I think that was back in 2017. That was a wiper malware. I feel like Mackenzie knows a lot about this stuff too, right? Because he works in the critical infrastructure space. The other thing that I think people have heard a lot about is satellite hacking. There's been, right before the invasion, there was tens of thousands of European customers that were knocked offline on the Viasat network. Some of the more recent ones that the U.S. was investigating that sort of disruption. So these are all things even before the conflict, right? These are things that set up a lot of that, a lot of the conflict. So post-conflict actions, this has really turned into a bit of an information war. There's a lot of propaganda from both sides, from Russia. Russia's really controlling their media. Ukraine has a minister of digital transformation. So they're using social media to pretty much troll. They've been trolling the Russians on like Twitter and stuff. They also had a call for hackers. So Ukraine has an IT army. The note here I have is 175,000, but I think more recent articles I read, it has the IT army at like 300,000. And they're pretty much giving out ballistic targets and, you know, all this different stuff. As well as doing things like protect
critical infrastructure and all sorts of stuff. There was a lot of misinformation early on. YouTube and Twitter and Facebook have been pulling out content like crazy to try and combat some of that stuff, a la, you know, the U.S. elections type of misinformation. And as we know with Russia, they deal in a lot of misinformation. That's kind of a lot of their game plan. There was some articles about Signal being hacked. It's not. That was meant to send people, you know, if they think Signal's, this goes back to the Okta thing, right, that we've talked about, where Okta, oh my gosh, Signal's been hacked, don't use it, go use some form of other, you know, non-secure communication, so it
Go
can
use
be
the thing we actually hacked, please.
Yeah. Some interesting things also came out about it, which was Ukraine was asked US to stop software updates. The problem with this, and there's also the call to pull Russia offline, and that's not necessarily as good as it might seem. But software updates, it might impact U.S. companies in Russia, right? So we still have U.S. companies in Russia, and also while this is the Russian government doing this, there are still Russian civilians. And so shutting them off from the internet too shuts them off from any sort of world communication, which means, guess what? Russia gets to control the narrative on this stuff and really gain Russian citizen support. See, they shut off our, they shut off our internet. It also makes consumer devices vulnerable if they don't do software updates. So there's been a bit of a, I don't want to say towing the line, but there's been some really interesting decisions that companies that operate in Russia and Ukraine have to make as part of this war. And that's the question too. Where do we start drawing the line between what's an active war and what's not? I think a lot of people think as, you know, physical activity is an act of war. But with the U.S. sharing so much information and supporting Ukraine and people sending, you know, money to Ukraine, where do we actually cross the line with that? So that's been an interesting topic of conversation. So some of the fallouts of the initial, this is all within the first month. The Russians actually lacked comms because it was so secret. The Russian army went into Ukraine and didn't have all their comms in place that they needed to do like extended communication. So they were stealing from civilians, like their cell phones and stuff, so they could call back to command. They also didn't have, when you go out into the field, you want to have some sort of crypto to be able to encrypt your radio communications. A lot of the Russian army communication was out in the open for anyone to listen to. So they were able to get full audio and I'll play that here in a second. I'm gonna see how this works, but I have some audio. I got an audio and there's a lot of different audio here of like Russian communications. Lots of the Russian army thought that it was a 3-day excursion. So that meant supply vehicles were still in Ukraine. Soldiers were walking away from equipment. And yeah, it was a bit of a mess, which isn't necessarily surprising for Russia. I'm pulling up one of the. You can't pipe in audio for me, can you? No. Okay, never mind. We'll skip that. Well, yeah, if I turn my mic on, but Yeah, no. Let's not try this live.
Is it a clip in Chrome?
I can make it in Chrome.
Drop it in Chrome, and then you can share your Chrome
tab. Okay. Technology. Yeah, we're doing this testing. I guess we should have tested this before. My bad. Let's see. So if I share tab, maybe tab would work. Let's see. Share. Can you hear this?
Прием. Буран и Алмаз, прием. Алмаз, я Буран. Эрка пока не готова. Напряжения не хватает. Я Буран, прием. Да, ну вас нахуй, баранов ебаных. Вы там стоите, блядь, трое суток, блядь. Прием. Я Буран 30, да. Хули там, ёб твою мать, когда будет готово, блядь, пиздец, ёбаный в рот, блядь. Я, Буран, принимаю меры. Старшего аппарат, прием. Я, Буран 30, понял.
All right, I think you get the idea there, right? It was, they could pick up call signs, roles, all sorts of valuable information. That's why, especially if you've been paying attention to it, there's been kind of a stall with the Russian advancement. So that's the wrong slide. All right. So yeah, that's been an interesting dynamic. Not necessarily internet related, but it's also still like radio waves and stuff like that. So. Some interesting stuff. Conti, if you guys remember Conti, a lot of ransomware games are associated with Russia. Conti decided to release a press release about how they supported Russia. And the problem with that is some of these ransomware gangs have a combination of Ukraine and Russian members. So in this case, they say it's a Ukrainian security researcher that released all this, but they pretty much dumped all of Conti's was it Telegram? I don't have it in this slide because I went with the short. It was pretty much their chat logs. It was their internal documents and chats leaked.
The Jabber link at the bottom is
yeah. Okay, yeah. So this person dumped a lot of interesting information. Krebs has a 4-part series going through these files. And some of the key highlights are ransomware gangs are run a lot like a business. There's different pieces. They do a lot of recruiting. They've got an HR department. There's a lot of interesting stuff that I won't bog down this presentation with. But there was a lot of interesting takeaways. There's also a lot about how much money they're making. And of course, the ties to Russia. And if you remember, prior to the invasion, Russia went and decided to arrest some ransomware gang crew in Russia. They talk about some of that within some of these chat logs about how they're not being targeted, but this other group is going to be targeted. They also, some other interesting notes, they have their own lawyer. They will partner with negotiators to get a better price. And the negotiators will give them kind of inside knowledge on stuff. They also pay journalists to write about their stuff as well. So they've got journalists, they've got negotiators. It's really fascinating stuff as far as acting like a business. And also, if you're a little busy bee worker, it's a shit environment. You see some of the complaints about how the working environment. It's very similar to some people's jobs. Where you might look at it and go, "Hey, I work there." So a lot of the same interesting thing. Of course, corporate sanctions stepped in to try and hurt, I guess, I don't know, impact Russia. I wouldn't say hurt, but impact Russia. So Apple halted all sales of their product in Russia. This included like Apple Pay, Apple Maps. and Google Maps no longer show traffic in Ukraine. You can see where that would be a huge advantage for Russian troops to see where like a large group of people are stuck in traffic or congregate. Like now Google Maps show you where there's a busy part of, you know, a restaurant or an area. So these tech companies had to turn off certain features to not help, you know, Russia. And I can tell you right now, like I use Google Maps so much for even just like day-to-day use that shut that off would have a real impact on me. So I imagine a lot of the Ukraine citizens are having to deal with some of that stuff.
Didn't one Josh Huff here to talk us through some of the other OSINT implications of the big data in the midst of a war.
Right. Well, and that's where I was talking. That's why I talked about some of the radio and call sign stuff, because that's all open source intelligence as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, but at the same time, I'm guessing that a lot of Ukrainians aren't commuting to work right now.
Sure.
Well, it depends, right?
Yeah.
And it's only certain cities, right? Russia hasn't taken over, and not every city is under, you know, a war. So there are certain cities that have been pounded more than others, but there are still civilians trying to go to work if they haven't fled already. There are still people that stay there. There are people that will never leave their home, right? Jeff, I think you were going to say something.
No, that's good. We're good.
All right. Russian news apps are only available in Russia. Apple still has to update stuff, right? They still have to update. They still provide updates to even Russian citizens. Disney, UPS, and FedEx have done sanctions. There's a lot of sanctions, so I'm not going to go through them all. Just some of the more interesting ones. Yeah. GM and Volvo. But this also highlights how many U.S. companies are in over there, right? And so the people on security teams for each one of these companies has not had a good couple months, right? And this is right after Log4Shell, right? They've had to go deal with that, and then it's like, crap, we got Russia invading Ukraine, because the concern is the NotPetya, right, where it goes from the Ukraine office and ends up in the U.S. offices. That's the issue there. Facebook and YouTube have limited Russian state media because Russia state media is considered very leaning towards Putin and their side. Lumen and Cognite have stopped routing.ru traffic. Again, this is where we kind of talked about it, where this leaves Russians with one voice. It might seem like a good idea to knock them off the internet, but then they're getting their news only from a Putin-controlled government, right? They're not getting, you know, stuff from, and we'll see about some of that stuff and why that's important that they have internet access, because there are initiatives to try and show Russian citizens what's actually happening out there.
There's also a strong argument for not unilaterally knocking one country off the internet because we don't like their government very much. Their information source. The whole point of the internet is that you can't unilaterally dismantle any one piece of it. And if we can all collectively just decide, nope, no more Russians, then okay, well, that works for the Russians today. Who's it work for tomorrow?
Yeah, I think Twitter set up a Tor network so that, you know, they could get around, so certain Russian citizens could get around the blockade, because Russia has like pretty much banned Twitter, and they've called out Facebook, and you know, they're doing their own. Like I said, it's a really big propaganda. Like, we're seeing a lot of what's been in war before, but we're seeing it now with technology, and we'll get into some more of that here in a little bit. So that was kind of the first month. Again, this is a two-part series. This is stuff that's more relevant within the last month. So social media has played an interesting angle here, as I was just talking about. Telegram, right? It can be used to share information with Russian-speaking users. And it's actually a source of news for Ukrainians between 18 and 24. I was just having this conversation the other day with someone. They're like, yeah, I just got on TikTok because that's what all the kids are using. I was like, yeah, Facebook is for old people now. So all this newer social media that I don't even want to deal with is what my kids will be Um, so, yeah, and a lot of people get their news from social media, rightly or wrongly. What's great about Telegram is that they can give early warning for potential raids. They can guide people to bomb shelters. So in Telegram's case, it's actually trying to provide information to people that they can use to go to these different places. They also, it's a place for foreign media to cite posts and news. So they're getting a lot of news there. On the Russian side of things, Nigerian social media accounts have been targeted. So Africa is actually a pretty big support. Like a lot of people in Africa, I don't want to say the countries themselves, but a lot of people sympathize with the Russian stuff. So there's been some Nigerian, I guess you want to say, thought leaders or content creators or whatever, having their accounts taken over to send support for the Russian invasion, right? And that's what Russia is going to try to do. They might not have Europe or the U.S. support, but they're going to go try to find the countries that have their support, and they're really going to, again, misinformation and trying to take advantage of that stuff. Apparently, a central social media management service was hacked called Buffer, which handles or helps people manage Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So people can have multi-factor on your social media accounts, but if you have a media management company handling your social media, you might want to put multi-factor on that one, and don't you reuse your password. There was 1,552 accounts accessed. A total of 618 accounts sent out stuff, and there was about 766 messages. So that's huge. And again, it was a credential stuffing attack, so they're using previously known passwords. So, and they're targeting African and Latin American countries because they kind of support Russia a little bit more than other countries. And the phishing that they're using too, which was interesting, is that they're taking advantage of security login alerts. So you know how you get a login alert saying, hey, someone has logged into your account? Totally doing the same thing here, only they're doing it from a different domain, which was interesting. Facebook has removed 27 accounts, 2 pages, 3 groups, and 4 Instagram accounts talking about the war and spreading misinformation. There's misinformation about Ukraine troop deaths. Like a lot of Ukraine troops are dying. Leadership is fleeing the country. And another interesting fact for these social media companies is that I think we get into this a little bit, is that we get to policy within, like, you can't do hate speech, you can't do certain things. And so they've really had to balance a lot of this stuff with the war. So there's a new debate around what is allowed to be shared during a war, right? Because these things were built in peacetime. So if on Instagram, certain people in Ukraine were trying to share that, these are some gruesome images, but they get taken down because it's, not great content. It's bodies in the streets. It's all this other stuff, but that's all information that maybe, some of the world is to see. Not saying it was right or wrong, but those are some of the things that a lot of these social media companies are kind of trying to balance right now with a war. I mean, with politics, it's a little bit of a lesser evil, but with a war, it's like, yeah, how much information do you allow for a country that's at war and actually being invaded by another country?
I would assume those protocols already exist. I don't understand how that part is new. Like, those companies are new. Like you said, there's never been an Instagram with a war before, but we've also had Iraq, Afghanistan war. Like, it's not that new.
But the Afghanistan-Iraq war, like, Facebook was just getting started. Twitter was just getting started. They weren't a big part of that war at the initial stages.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking like journalism, like you don't show dead bodies, like faces, stuff like that.
Didn't ISIS have a Twitter account?
Yeah, I mean, I think like eventually some of this.
Out, vote him out.
I wonder the degree to which there's been a steady intermedification of reality, right? That more and more people and things are online, and it's just a
Well, I mean,
Well, and
I
I would
that
go ahead.
it's like I mean, you know, it's like we were talking about, you know, it's like just everything, you know, not to say these things aren't big world problems or events, but they're so far that so many more people know about them and it's impossible not to know something about
It's significantly more visible now, but I think it's just the fact that the internet being in everyone's pocket is a radically new thing that's happened in the last 20 years. Like, I had a flip phone up until like 2007. Like, the 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 development of the technology to just be able to broadcast whatever's happening in front of me with my cell phone onto the internet is a really new technology.
Well, and pictures and videos have gotten extremely better to the point that the newer iPhones are just as good as $1,000 camera. So, yeah. Well, and you know, to your like David, like they've had to make half a dozen content policy changes at Facebook alone, going back and forth between just what can be shared and what can't be shared. You know, what's against terms of service and what's like actual. Hey, this, and on the other.
NSFW, like,
I mean, maybe you can, but I mean, the other thing these social media companies are wrestling with is the legacy of the last 5 years, right? Because before Russia started this conflict, they were in active they were in an active role trying to destabilize the West with a social media campaign, right? They actively worked to manipulate votes in the U.S. and the EU to great effect in France, to great effect in the U.S. There's strong evidence that they triggered Brexit, that they exacerbated the vote for Brexit online to drive people to go and vote that way, knowing that it would drive a division between England and the rest of the EU, and that's a major threat for Russia off the board. And while the Trump administration was in the White House in the U.S., that was another major threat off the board for Moscow.
Yeah.
Right? So they were extraordinarily successful in manipulating social media to achieve political gains that they could not have achieved by any other means. So it's very interesting to me looking at these social media companies living through that and then immediately following that having this happen. And so I understand why they're kind of struggling with what do they do next? Like, how do they moderate the content? And how do you moderate it at scale?
Yeah.
Like, you can't assign people to go and do the work. I mean, it can. It's just going to take a lot of them. And that's all they're ever going to do. And they're going to hate their jobs. And they're going to quit after a month.
Well, like you said, you know, right now it's just, okay, this is gruesome or this is whatever, you know, insensitive, you know, whatever they're, it's just delete. But is there an exception that needs to be made or could be made?
Yeah.
And then how do you know, screen that?
How do you
or say, hey, this is
how do you stop somebody
content
in the U.S. from posting pictures of their mutilated pets and allow someone in Ukraine to post pictures of victims of a Russian missile attack, right? Like,
yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing. Going back to kind of some of the OSA was the I think there were Russia was claiming the dead bodies that you're seeing were being propped up by Ukrainians. But you could go to Google Images then and see, no, those bodies have been there for a while, or Google Maps, right? There's able to see satellite pictures of the bodies laying there for 2 weeks. So it's a very, it's interesting in that, you know, I think to Adam's point, like Russia's been able to get away with a lot of disinformation, and now there's almost like a snoops for the world to go, no, you're bullshit. That is wrong. But, you know, yeah. Continuing kind of on that same thing, media activism has been a big thing. some of the articles talk about we use memes as like a coping mechanism. It worked really well for politics, but for a war where there's actual life or death scenarios, it hasn't as a big of a impact. So this is an interesting thing where someone took the head of Ukraine and put him on Captain America's body and called him Captain Ukraine to try and rally support. I'm actually going to show you, since we got audio, I'm going to show you a video of some of the interesting content that someone created.
Because before there were I think political cartoons from way back in the day actually kind of remind me of political memes today. You know what I mean? In a lot of ways, and they were used in very much the same kind of context.
Yeah. No, well, and you think about Captain America, right? That was Stan Lee started that during World War II to fight Nazis. So to your point, yeah, that stuff has always been around. We're just as you'll see here with this video, it's become a lot quicker.
But why is it not effective in wartime? It seems like I don't know how necessarily effective political cartoons were in wartime, but they still use them and people still seem to like them. So
go ahead, Mackenzie.
I don't know. I love Ukraine tracker memes. So
I think, well, it's again, they talked about the coping mechanism is that people used it, but like the media, some of the memes and stuff haven't taken off. Like I didn't see that Captain Ukraine is still actually search for it, but apparently it's been around since like late February.
The only thing that I've donated to is send it was a meme fundraiser to send like more John Deeres to Ukraine or whatever. Like the only fundraiser I donated to. But then again, right, I think what you might be trying to get at, right, is that it might not be as effective if your house is getting bombed, but like I'm just a trash American living in my cushy townhouse.
Yeah. No, I think it's entertaining. There's well, and like I said, they used it as a coping mechanism to dealing with some of the stuff. When we talk about life or death scenarios, memes just don't have that big of a play in it. Now, for a lot of us in the background, and as you're about to see here, this is a really interesting. I don't know why I went that, but we're doing. I guess we're gonna have to do this. Oh, let's see if I do that. No, let's do that. Yeah, this is an interesting. This is from anybody who hasn't seen Endgame. I'm sorry. But this is like one of the final battles at Endgame.
Captain Sam, can you hear me? On your left.
Assemble.
Yeah. So I found that online. So it's an interesting dynamic. To your point about political cartoons, they've turned into let's refactor some of the most popular and arm chilling scenes from movies. It's God, like this whole thing is just fascinating to me. Yeah, some of my favorites in there is like Ant-Man comes out and it's like $350 million from the U.S. Whatever the CIA is doing. So I love some of the creativity of that. There's also protest wear now. So if we needed any more sort of wear, there's a couple different things. There's open source code altered to send a message about the war. So people are going and putting in open source. I'm letting it go by. I mean, yeah, open source code changes to and some of it's just to send messages, like drop a banner and this all goes back to our supply chain issue, right? With Log4Shell and everything, is knowing what open source you're using, because your company website that has nothing to do with this war might start popping up a banner saying, in support of Ukraine or whatever. There's also a guy that's submitted code to wipe Russian or Belarusian files specifically. So you can target individual companies based on keyboards and, keyboard languages and other triggers that might cause issues for companies that are operating with it. So to add on to wiper malware, now when it got open source for US companies that are operating in Russia, right, or Belarus, that need to be concerned about that impacting some of their stuff. So interesting activism there. Squad 303, they believe it's a set of Polish programmers because Squad 303 was a World War II reference. They have a tool that they've created to reach out to random rushes via text, WhatsApp, or email. So a lot of the effort has been, trying to educate Russian citizens about what's actually going on. And so this tool was created to do that. There's 100 people involved from multiple countries. A lot of the core group is from Poland. They're having to battle DDoS attacks from the Russian government. So they know that they're being effective because the Russian government's coming after them. And they found that they have to change their content every 6 hours because they've got Russian administrators blocking their content based on the words they're using in emails, headers, things like that. So they have to keep rotating. So this is where someone's doing some sort of activism, but they're kind of acting like attackers here, right? These are things that attackers will do. We talked about Conti. They will test their malware every 4 hours just to make sure that, a new an EDR or virus total hasn't picked it up or anything else there. So there's a lot of, I think we're learning about some of the inner workings of attacker organizations and how they kind of think about stuff. They are looking to do a feature request for calls in the future. So not just text, WhatsApp, or email, but they're looking to be able to call Russian citizens and tell them what's going on. So we've got, go ahead. What?
Imagine being a Russian citizen, like living in this, and then you just have like a bunch of random Westerners text you all day and be like, hey, do you know your government shit? And you're just like, thanks.
Well, it's not Westerners either. It's Polish, it's Ukrainians. They said they had a guy in Japan. It's
starving, like you only have vodka left, like your money's been blocked, and then you have this guy in Poland like, hey, Vasily, guess what?
Yeah.
It was bad. You're like,
yeah.
I mean, we get that every election year. You get random text messages like, hey, we're really good. And like,
yeah, it's spam, right?
There was a post a while ago about a walkthrough guide about how to enable all the Find My features on all of your Apple products, so that when your Apple products get looted by Russian troops, it can track them.
Oh, really?
So if your AirPods or your Apple phone or your laptop get taken, and then the Russian troops bring them back to their military bases or their convoys or their supply depots and stuff like that,
so
if they have an unrestricted Wi-Fi connection, they can track them.
That's cool.
A couple 100 million Apple AirTags to Ukraine.
Ukrainian farmers have all of their assets, all of the Russian assets. I mean, what does it need to track?
My favorite of those tractor memes is the tractor hauling the Moskva.
What's the Moskva?
So the Moskva was the
Is that the ship?
the Russian flagship in the Black Sea.
Yeah. Okay, I know what you're talking about.
And when the Ukrainians sank it, the Russian Navy had to completely redeploy because it was the backbone of their like radar and anti-ship capability. And when it went down, well,
Look, I'm not pro-Russia. Okay, I'll say that first before I say this. I'm really disappointed in Russia's response to this whole thing. I thought
By that statement, you should just stop.
I thought they were better.
No, I agree. In Call of Duty, they're much stronger.
the Russian military has postured as if it is stronger. So I'll have to find and see if I can post them in this Slack. I read a couple of really interesting articles about the gangster cronyism that basically is the mechanism that the Russian government operates under, and the fact that gangster cronyism sort of insulates Putin from understanding how ready his troops and facilities actually are. So he's told everything's great and we've got one of the best militaries in the world. He probably truly believes that because that's what all of his reports say. But the budget to replace all the tires on his military vehicles, nah.
Basically, he was surrounded by yes men who never
surrounded by yes men, and that's been demonstrated time and again in this war, where they extend like they're going to do this blitzkrieging and they're going to seize the capital and be done in 3 days, except that all of their tires suddenly burst and all of their convoy is stretched out over 60 miles and stationary, and the Ukrainians go, okay, well, we've got rocket launchers for that.
We had like 10,000 javelins waiting in Germany.
It wouldn't be burst, it would be delaminate. Because they're made like semi-truck tires and...
Okay, fine.
Well, it's like everybody's careers in that arena have been built on political standing rather than actual.
Get back on your motorcycle,
performance
Pete.
and success.
So they forgot to test their DR, basically.
They forgot to test their production.
Yeah.
Pump DR.
True.
And they really underestimated our bloated military industrial complex. I'm sure defense contractors were just giddy the moment they invaded. They're like, oh my God, we have 10,000 javelins that were just in this warehouse in Germany. Now we get to make 10,000 more. So we're just throwing toys over the border, just saying, have at it.
We're throwing toys on our dime over the border.
Yeah.
And
just so we can build more.
Yeah, right. Here, Northrop Grumman, please.
Well, we can't build these new javelins unless these javelins get used up. So.
It's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
As you were, Tim.
So there are hackers getting involved. Good discussion. Good discussion, by the way. I was just listening in.
Got weird.
Did it?
Go on top of your computer.
No. Is that better?
No, he's better now.
It looks like your microphone's on top of your head.
Now he's muted. Now it's worse.
Oh, he doesn't even have a microphone.
You muted yourself, I think, Tim.
I got hear him in my head.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I don't have a microphone on my head. It's a blue. It's a snowball like you got in your desk. See? It's the little buddy. It's a little buddy. You're a snowball.
The Rebel Edition?
The Rebel Edition?
Instead of the Dark Empire Edition?
No, I've had it for a while. Yeah. So can you hear me better now?
I knew where you were going. He didn't get it. But...
Yes,
No.
Ready, thank you.
Yeah.
We're not done heckling you, but we're ready.
Well, I would expect nothing less. So, so hackers. This is both sides. Russian support. There was a guy arrested recently for providing Russian troops with mobile communication services in Ukraine. There was up to 1,000 calls made in one day. So that kind of talks about some of the communication issues if they're able to actually rely on hackers to provide calls and communications. To your point about yes men and yeah, we're ready for war. We're not going to tell anybody, but we're going to go ahead and invade. So there's also about 25 hacking groups that have been identified in support of Russia. Just a couple names: Sandworm, Ghost Rider, and Fancy Bear. There's also the Chinese group, which recently got identified as Scarab. Yeah, Fancy Bear. Anything. So what I've discovered is that anything bear is associated with Russia. Mackenzie, keep me honest here because you're nodding your head. Anything panda is associated to Chinese threat actors.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, I don't know, man. I don't know who comes up with these names, but they got names for North
Mandiant.
Korea too. Which one's North Korea? I don't know them. Mackenzie probably knows them all.
I don't know them all. I just know what FireEye tells me.
You got to collect them all. You got to collect them all as an organization. Collect all your threat actors.
That's what we need is the Pokemonification of threat actors.
CrowdStrike. Is that. Absolutely. No joke. They got avatars.
Seriously?
Yes. Yeah. No.
That's fantastic.
They have cartoons of every.
I need it.
Yeah, I think CrowdStrike is where a lot of those come from too. By the way, yeah.
Iran is apparently kitten. I don't know
Kitten?
why, but they got they're kitten.
America's definitely Charizard, right?
Charizard?
Yeah, Pidgey. America's definitely Charizard.
I'm going with Pidgey.
We can't be.
I'm sure Nintendo would license that.
Yeah. Why not?
Hashtag not sponsored by CrowdStrike.
Anonymous, of course, is involved. They've been praised by the Ukraine government, but no links to the group. They've been hacking TV stations. They claim they've, hacked 2,500 Russian and Belarusian websites. More recently, ransomware groups are targeting Russia. So that's a bit of a turn from, Russian-based companies or Russian-based criminal gangs targeting other people with ransomware. Yes. Yeah. So at some point there was malware out there that would not install ransomware if you had the Russian packet language installed. You just need to be installed. You didn't need to be using it, the packet language. So some defenders probably implemented that. Yeah, you might want to go on and install that because you might get hit. If you have an office in Russia or Belarus. But they've been going after companies, media, and government. They also took the Conti. Remember the Conti leaks? They took the Conti source code to make unique ransomware targeting Russia. So, yeah, the hack back thing, the offensive security hacking thing that debate has sparked up again during this conflict. I didn't really cover it here, but this is a hierarchy of Ukraine's digital war. We see the IT Army you've kind of discussed there. You got volunteers that kind of report stuff. That's the thing that's really been highlighted here too, is that civilians have got a lot more involved because of Adam's point about everybody has a phone in their pocket, right? So they're able to communicate with a lot of people telling them, like I said previously, about like bomb shelters and troop movements. Like this is like civilians have had an impact before. Like what you think about World War II, but it was more like someone had to go ride a bike to the other town to like report, hey, there's troops coming. Now it's a simple text message saying, go to your bomb shelter or get the hell out of Dodge right now because troops are coming.
So very early in the conflict, before the Russians started shelling apartment complexes and shit like that, there were videos on Twitter and TikTok of citizens confronting soldiers, like, get the hell out of my country. I don't want you here. And I'm absolutely stone dead certain that's happened in every conflict that has ever taken place where the soldiers didn't open fire on the first civilian they saw.
What's that square? It was like Tiananmen Square, where the guys around the tanks. Yeah, and that was only captured because there was a photographer there. But you're probably right, Adam. Is that
absolutely certain it's happened in every conflict?
Yep.
It's just there's cameras everywhere now, and it's instantly on the internet for everybody to see all the time. So yeah, I feel like this is a more visible war because of the fact that the internet is in everyone's pocket.
And as we found out with previous U.S. wars, the more media there, the more the attacking side, takes a hit for it, or the bigger side takes a hit for it. And in this case, Russia's the bigger country. Now, whether or not they're going to actually accept any of that is yet to be seen. But Ukraine has definitely leveraged social media, and because they kind of have to, because like I said, Russia is the bigger one in this one, so they're really relying on supporters of their IT army, which is pretty much a volunteer army for digital. And so they're doing things like DDoS attacks, defacements, disrupting Russian government websites, banks, media, e-commerce, and the last one is most interesting: streaming services. You want to piss off a country's citizens? Take away their streaming services or disrupt it so they can't stream, the latest episode of whatever's Tiger King. I don't know the reference at this point. You can tell I don't watch a lot of streaming services right now. My biggest thing is Kim's Convenience, which is a Canadian TV show. I highly recommend it. But if that was taken away from me, I would be pissed off. Ted Lasso. There we go. Ted Lasso. That's more relevant.
Now, I was reading something about how a bunch of Russian girls on OnlyFans were just completely destitute because they lost all their income from being kicked off the internet.
Yep. So that's the intent, right? That's what's going to start. If they start having more and more protests within Russia to end this war, that makes an impact as well. So that's what a lot of people's there's multifacets. Like, war has become so complicated now. It's not just troops marching in anymore. It's troops and the digital citizen. Mackenzie, were you trying to say something?
I was just going to say, if any distressed Russian young single lady is trying to escape to America, my mom keeps bugging me about grandchildren, and I guess I could go with an on par / wife, right? So
and now we're on a list somewhere. Thanks.
Now I find it very admirable. He's taking in refugees.
It's been a good
yeah.
It's been a good 6-year run. Thanks for ending.
I think we were already on that list, anyways.
Jeff is not wrong.
I will also take Ukrainian refugees. Right? Just anyway, continue. Sorry.
Yep. I'll try to move on. 237 Russian websites have been targeted. What's interesting about this IT army is 40% of the people involved are outside the Ukraine. I got a Teams message from my boss at work. He was like, I know this is dumb, but I have to say this. He copy and pasted in. Do not hack Russia from the corporate network. He's like, not saying you can't do it, but don't do it on company hardware. Don't do it on the company network. Because I think Rapid7 got in trouble for that. If I'm not mistaken, there's been some people that went, that have hackers on there, and we have hackers at our company that went pretty gung-ho and did it from, if you're going to do it on your own time, do it at, your own network. Don't do it on the core. Don't be connected to the company VPN hacking Russia.
I don't have gig internet like the company does.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and it's, well, and a lot of it too is that there's more of a legal precedent. I don't think I have anything in here on this, but the CFAA applies to anybody that's going to go hack Russia. So if you're going to go hack Russia and you're on U.S. soil, the CFAA could apply to you. Not saying it's going to, but it's still broad enough and not specify that you could be convicted under U.S. law for hacking Russia.
What is CFAA?
The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and it is
Remember, accessing a computer system without explicit consent is up to 15 years in prison.
It was started after the movie War Games, which was a young.
Exceptionally broad law around computer security, and it is frequently used to over prosecute and bury.
Wait,
Yeah,
what
there's
can
a
you?
presentation here.
What would you get 15 years for?
If you
You-
access a computer without authorization, that's a violation of Computer Fraud and Abuse Act.
So more recently that's been in the news is view source code on a website. Like that had to go to a legal court to determine if someone had hacked a website by doing view source code.
Really?
Yes.
Yes, it ended up, you know.
Shit, what the hell?
It had to go to federal court.
Yeah.
Got accused of it.
It's how the CIA recruits talent. See, what they do is they catch you in a corner. They catch you in a corner. They're like, "This is your option here. You're gonna come work for us, or for 15 years."
That was 20 years ago, no longer.
My favorite analogy for the CFAA is a surgeon bringing a chainsaw to a surgery. That is the CFAA. I mean, if you're going to lose a limb, sure, but if you're just doing an incision, a chainsaw is not necessary.
Anyway, it's an exceptionally broad law.
Yeah.
It sounds like a stupid.
Desperately needs to be rewritten, but that's not the world.
I mean, I guess like accessing a computer without authorization, if it had a little more detail to it.
Yeah, but it was written by politicians in the 90s, and they're
After seeing 80s, in the 80s, after seeing a movie. Would you like to play a game?
If you log on to my computer without my permission, you know.
That's pretty much it. So moving on to software getting involved. I'm just gonna start rambling off names here. There's one called Caddy Wiper, which is a destructive malware. It follows Hermetic Wiper and Isaac Wiper. Disbalancer, which rewards crypto for stress testing networks. They released which sounds like a DDoS company, just straight up. They released Liberator as a DDoS tool. What's interesting about that is that people have turned that and like created fake versions to spread as spy on people that install the Liberator DDoS, right? So like there's a lot of let's go DDoS something, but then there's a lot of like counterintelligence going on saying, hey, yeah, just go download this thing from SourceForge. It's fine. The Acid Rain was used to wipe modems and routers. It was attributed to Russia, and it was an attack on the VSAT thing. An Indestroyer variant. So there we've seen a lot of variants targeting specific stuff because they don't want things to spread out their ecosystem. Probably so that people don't dissect the malware, but also because they want to really target stuff. Was this the one that you were talking about, Mackenzie? It went after high voltage electrical substations, computers, network and server equipment, specifically Linux. And people were wondering how they went from like control systems to computers. They were using SSH tunnels to get across. Is that what you were? Was that the recent one, or was there
so there was actually two. I mean, there's only 7 examples of explicit ICS design malware, and 2 of them came out last week. So it went from 5 to 7.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, so Indestroyer, or like variant name dubbed Indestroyer 2, is this one. Pipe Dream is a what's it called? It's a framework. What's the it's like a Metasploit for industrial control system hacking. That's what a Pipe Dream is.
Okay.
So those 2 both came out last week. You don't have to give any contact to Dragos to download our white papers. That's an explicit thing that they made. If you just go to Dragos, download white paper, it'll pop up contact information, and then under that it says skip. You just hit skip and it'll download the white paper for you.
They made the skip really small, didn't they?
It's not.
And it's
hard.
blended. It's the same color as the as the background, right? Good to know. Thank you, Mackenzie. Yeah. We need to get them as a sponsor. Like, you've been pimping them pretty hard here. We need to get a sponsor here for some beers or something.
They don't sponsor things. We're a startup company. We need the money.
Yeah, I've seen startup companies with money. You burn money like crazy. You guys were on the
money bonfire rituals or something? I'm kidding.
I was gonna say they were on the New York Stock Exchange.
They did that for free. That was just gotta throw that out there. It's free.
Mackenzie's is in a very. Should we just all sit in silence and stare at Mackenzie?
Here,
right
no, a second. I'm just drawing up an image for you real quick.
Is it an eggplant? All right. So moving on to other malware. There's an RU ransom, which is supposed to be a wiper targeting Russia. We've kind of talked about that a little bit. Some of the other stuff, more recently, Germany came out and said Kaspersky's bad. The U.S. government has been saying that for a while now. But Kaspersky, even though they say they operate different from the government, with the Russian government being the way they are, the Russian government can come in and say, Kaspersky, you will comply or you're going to disappear, right? Some other things from the IT Army is that you can play for Ukraine. It's a game that puts a load on Russian network to shut down sites. So you can go play a game to pretty much shut down Russian sites. We kind of talked about this a little bit too. There's not been as much digital hacking from Russia as we expected. Probably because instead of hacking infrastructure, they probably could just go bomb it. Right? Why would they go waste the time hacking if they could just go send some missiles after it? So that's been an interesting dynamic to the war as well. But speaking of bombing digital infrastructure, got to give props to the Ukraine technicians for keeping the internet online, because Ukraine has mostly been online throughout this entire war. That was one of the biggest things, is expecting tanks and other stuff to roll through and take out stuff. What's interesting about Ukraine...
That only works if your tank isn't being dragged around by a John Deere.
Well, what's interesting too about this is that Ukraine, instead of having like 3 major ISP providers like we have here in the States, they've got about 5,000 internet providers. Now, only 100 are active, which makes you feel even less, right? And they're they're like the size of the Northeast. So they still have a decentralized network. So you can't necessarily take out just one major provider and knock out a third of the U.S. So, and a lot of it too is that like these guys that were competitors at one point, when it comes to war, they are now on the same team. So they're sending techs out to the same place just to get stuff online. Go ahead. Took out the entire Southeast? Yeah, I lived that one. Yeah, for...
How the hell does how can I take out one city block anywhere and take out the entire Southeast of the U.S.?
I will recommend, because I had my neighbors had this problem. They were on AT&T, and this was the building that was bombed. They had home internet, they had phone, they had everything through AT&T. Whereas I'm sitting here with a Verizon phone, AT&T internet at home, which was knocked out, and a Sprint T-Mobile MiFi, right? So I had internet. my neighbors didn't. They were coming over to use our MiFi and my Verizon. But
it should be a hell of a lot more reliable than it is, and it's not.
Yes. Yeah.
For the last 3 decades, we've allowed the telecom companies to just consolidate until there's one left. And I can go and take one set of bolt cutters and cut some fiber, and well, good luck, kids.
or park a Winnebago outside of one of the main hubs.
When net neutrality was struck down by Congress, they deregulated the only ability to classify ISPs as actual utility providers. That provision was gone.
Right.
So now government has no way to control, like, unintended consequence, net neutrality also is what we use to regulate.
You say unintended consequence. I say they got exactly what they wanted. The lobbyist won.
Right, but now we're in a position where you can't put any restrictions on an ISP because it is not a utility.
Right. And until Congress gets off their ass and says, by law, you're a utility, get over it.
Then they
Here we
can
are.
do whatever they want.
Correct. Anyway, back to you, Craig.
I put an image in the chat for you, Tim.
Did you? I'm supposed to share this image.
I'm not bitter or anything.
I'm going to share this at the end. Mackenzie, remind me to share this at the end. That's a bit of a tease. So when there are outages in the Ukraine, it's only a few hours unless, there's tanks involved. If there's tanks involved, the technicians are kind of like, can't help you because there's a tank, here. So the techs are braving Warzone. They haven't lost a lot of techs either. By the way, that was one interesting note, is that they've lost a tech because their house was bombed and they were at home when it happened, right? But a lot of these techs too, they're living in bomb shelters. So you think about, like, they're kind of all living in bomb shelters away from families to try and help with making sure things are online. One of the sad but interesting things. Do what?
Speaking of civilians getting involved in conflict.
Yeah. But I mean, when you have conflict, all civilians are involved, right? That's what I was saying. Like with the communication and stuff, it's happened before. You even talked about standing in front of tanks. Civilians are going to get involved. It's unfortunate that they don't have guns and can really defend themselves. But there's always, even in I always think of the this is bad. Enemy at the gates. It's like talks about the Russian snipers and the guy that they had crawling with a line to repair the phone communication, right? And those were the guys that were picked off to try and disrupt communications. That's a lot harder now, but these techs are essentially braving a war zone. What's interesting, it's a bit of a dark humor in that what used to take them 8 hours in peacetime is only taking them about 6.5 hours to complete. Because you know what? When they're in a war zone, they want to get that line up pretty quickly. They want to repair that wire and move on to the next thing. And the wire.
When you don't have to wait on the power company to come and take down their lines, because it's not there because there's a tank
right.
on top of it.
Right. Yeah. So they're having to make do with so they're in a lot of stress, and a lot of people have recognized that they're kind of a little bit of the unsung heroes in this war, is that they're like they've had an 84% uptime as the date for that was March 25th.
While under active shelling, 84% uptime.
Well, and a lot of them don't, if there's active shelling, it's like, why even go repair a thing? Because they're going to be
actively, like, those guys aren't repairing the fiber under fire, but like.
Well, and that's the thing too. That's the other thing that they called out, right? Is that when you're talking about repairing fiber, it's not a soldering thing. You're talking about using special tooling.
Let me get my fusion splicer out here.
Right, and you're talking about lines that are like the size of a hair, and they're having to do this in uncomfortable conditions. Like this started in February in Ukraine, right? This is like pretty much trying to repair lines in Minnesota at this time, all the way back to February, right? So there's cold conditions, it's miserable, all this stuff. Props to them for keeping this stuff going. And they need internet too. Like the country needs internet because they need to know what's going on. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's a bit of a dark humor, right? Where it's like they're out there in the middle of the night trying to repair this stuff. They have to deal with also, this goes back to there are still civilians living in a place, and there's a lot of military that have what's it called, hours that they can be out, right? So they've had to work with the military to ensure, hey, well, I need to be out these extra 4 hours to make sure this cable's repaired. And they have to get to some, like, they have to manually dig a trench 2 meters deep and 5 meters wide, right? So to repair these cables, they have to dig trenches for a lot of this stuff as well, which just adds to some of the work that's going on. Another interesting fact too that Ukraine has figured out: if Russia seizes infrastructure, right, they haven't bombed it, so this is where they have to balance the bombing it versus trying to seize it with tanks. Is Ukraine can then block that infrastructure because they would have a middleman at that point. They seize infrastructure, they've got middleman for all of Ukraine communication. But you know, Ukraine has gotten wise to that. If the Russians take it over, they'll just block that infrastructure. U.S. government involvement. They've done Cyber Command, which is based in Augusta, Georgia. Does a lot of remote analytical support and conducted network defense activities, which means they were trying to help Ukraine test their infrastructure. They have things called hunt forward teams to identify network vulnerabilities. So I imagine Spring for Shell was something that they had to go identify. I mean, we joked about it earlier, but they had to go identify that to see if there's any infrastructure. DOJ and FBI disrupted Sandworm, which was Voodoo Bear. That is also, I think I kind of skipped over that. Sandworm is attributed to China, which means they are the first. That's the first known involvement of China in this conflict. And what they did was kind of take over some of their botnet infrastructure. So they were able to disable C2, which disconnected any computers talking to this botnet. And then they were able to remove any malware from machines and copy it for analysis. The DOJ had worked with the United Kingdom on a lot of this stuff. So there's other countries being involved with this. They also called out WatchGuard, Firebox firewalls were impacted. So if you have any of those, there might be issues there. There's also I think we've talked about some of the financial stuff here a little bit, right? The Hydra market, underground market for illegal and money laundering activity, was seized by German authorities. This has a Russian link, so they're trying to hit Russia, where even the criminal gangs where their money's at, right? So like life is miserable in Russia and Ukraine at this point, and it's not necessarily Ukraine has sent troops into Russia, but a lot of the rest of the world is kind of like just making things miserable with some of the other things we talked about, like sanctions and stuff. So that's a lot. I feel like we've gone like almost a little over an hour, right? About an hour. So any other questions or comments or additions to that? Say that again? China, I think. Is it Russia? Yeah, they have Voodoo Bear, so yeah, that was. Yeah. Hold on. Hold on, I gotta share Mackenzie's thing here so you guys can see that. We'll do a search after that. Window. All right, so if you want to download a Dragos report, I'd like to point out though that is kind of shady by marketing, man. Yeah, I know. A light blue and white. Yes, absolutely. So it did kind of blend.
Sorry, I use dark mode, so it shows up real clean. Like.
There was a recent Sandworm Dune. Kinda. I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, good.
Hold on. Sandworm botnet. Yeah, so you're right. Yeah, it was Sandworm. There was a more recent one with hold on, Ukraine, Russia, China, security. There was a group that like recently got identified. I thought Sandworm was it, but you're right. It's Russia. But yeah.
Tim, I dropped a link from The Guardian that might be what you're looking for.
Thank you. Which group was it?
I'm trying to see. I don't know if they. Yeah, it doesn't look like they actually.
Well, yeah. Either way, I mean, China and Russia are known as allies, so yeah.
Tim, they're calling it Scarab.
Scarab. That's what it was. Yeah, I did mention that. You're right. It's Scarab.